Hello, and welcome to the Click and Obey podcast. Today we're going to be talking Supreme Court. Apparently, Joe Biden has set up a committee to figure out what they want to do with the Supreme Court, including potentially expanding it. Mesh, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this is crazy. Just off the bat, full stop. I know, so I want to mention some of the history here with the number of Supreme Court justices over the years, just to provide context. But there is, of course, there's a lot that goes into these numbers. But here's the numbers anyway. So since 1789, there was six. 1801, five. 1802, six. 1807, seven. 1837, 9. 1863, 10. 1866, 7. 1869, 9. And it stayed at 9 since 1869. So as you can see, like for the first about 80 years, there was kind of a lot of volatility with the numbers. 9 was in there a couple of times, 7 was in there a couple of times, but so for the first the starting chapter of this country, basically, there was a lot of volatility, and there were several reasons for that. Like I think 1863, when they went to 10, it was actually Lincoln, and I think they were looking, if I'm not mistaken, um, it was just like just in case there were some vacancies or like illness, or because it was like during the Civil War, so there was kind of like a question of availability, basically.
Yeah, that's probably one of those times you could toss out, right? Like the 1860 to
Yeah,
65,
yeah,
the 67 even we'll call it that because like give or take a couple years, it's like, yeah, let's toss this section out. It's kind of a weird ass time. Granted,
yeah.
today's also weird as shit, so maybe
It
we got to
is.
toss these years out in the future as well.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I think that's the justification was like, hey, we did it before. Why not do it again? Especially in light of Merrick Garland and Amy Coney Barrett kind of getting rammed through or whatever. That seems to be the view. It's like, hey, well, we've done it in the past and some bullshit just happened and two wrongs make a right. So, tit for tat, eye for an eye. Um, so I kind of think that's what's going on here is that they're using that justification of, hey, this has happened in the past, plus some bullshit that I think is bullshit happened, and we're allowed to do bullshit in return. And so I think that's kind of where this is coming from. But again, I think context and nuance is definitely missing here. It's definitely, if you look at the past, there were reasons for why they did that were much stronger than any reasons you could make today, in my mind. Again, I think like sickness, availability. There was a war, during Lincoln's tenure, and they were just kind of like, or at least there was a war brewing when he started that. So it was kind of like pretty sketchy times, and um, I don't think we have something like that today. I think it's purely partisan on both sides, really. The Merrick Garland thing, yeah, it was partisan, but um, doing two partisan things in a row doesn't make it right.
Yeah, it just feels like this country's just kind of like splintering apart at the seams at this point. I mean, we'll see if anything actually happens. My guess is nothing does because I don't know if Joe Biden wants to have the legacy of like, oh, I expanded the Supreme Court and then I lost in 2024 and the Republicans just re-expanded the Supreme Court or took away whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever's going to happen after that. Because if you uncork this bottle, right, the genie's out and people will just use it whenever they see fit. Whenever a party has full control of the government, they're just going to add Supreme Court justices because that's what they can do. So if that's the route they go, that Supreme Court means shit. It means nothing. Like it's just irrelevant. Whatever
Yeah.
whatever you want to happen, you can just expand it, rush in some judges, and then go. And so it's like, yeah, at that point, like, what the hell's the point? The Supreme Court means nothing. Because also, you should be legislating anyway. Why the fuck are we legislating from the bench in the first place?
Yeah, so this is a great point I think that you bring up, which is that all this shit around the Supreme Court is a total distraction from the actual problem. The actual problem is that legislators suck, all of them, especially on the national level. Um, they are terrible at their jobs, and so uh, what they do is, well, they look to the Supreme Court, which has, a lot of power. It's a third of the government, and there's only a few people, so there's less moving parts. So, and they're able to pull the levers a little bit easier there than they are in the legislative branch, and I think it's just a shortcut. And
Yeah,
of
you
course,
just need five people, right? Like that's
yeah,
all you have
yeah,
to do is get five people to agree on what the law is supposed to mean. Not even what the law says, just what it's supposed to mean. And you go from there. It's like
yeah.
that's crazy.
So I think this overpowering of the Supreme Court, like the courts should not be this powerful. They should not have this much power. They're starting to reach a point where it's like easily the most powerful branch, and I just think this is just a hack and a shortcut to kind of get your legislative agenda through. And it's like, no, you should do what is intended, um, and actually get it through the legislative process, and not through this shortcut hack that you found. And yeah, I think you're right. Like this just opens up the floodgates. Like if you do this, I think it just becomes another partisan thing. Like when Newt Gingrich kind of started the whole impeachment thing as a political thing, that came back to backfire. I mean, there were three impeachment attempts on the last president, two of them that went through, I guess. Well, we'll see with this one.
Yeah.
He's not even a sitting president anymore. But anyways,
He's been
um,
impeached, but he hasn't been convicted, and you can't
yeah,
even say whether it's legal to even impeach a non
yeah,
the whole thing. We're in
so
stupid times.
stupid. But my main point is that like now, who trusts impeachment? It's just a partisan political tool. It's like, oh, I don't like you, impeach. That's what people feel. That's what
Uh,
people feel.
Well, today Democrats trust it because they're impeaching the person they hate. As soon as Republicans get in power in 2022, which is most likely, right? If you're a betting man, you're probably putting your money on it. Like they'll impeach Biden or Kamala or whoever, and then that becomes a thing, right? You just keep trading off impeachments, and it's like,
Yeah,
why? What are we
yeah.
doing?
So you take away what I think would be kind of an important thing to have. Like if there's a Nixon, you need to be able to impeach him, or you know what I mean?
Or
And
threaten it so that he'll step down, right? Because that's what
right.
happened with Nixon. He just resigned.
And now you've destroyed it because you love partisan politics.
Well,
So
they
that's
also
gone.
they're just obfuscating their job, right? Like they're just saying we don't need to actually legislate. We just need to be on Twitter and we need to be in the public eye and act like we're doing something.
Yeah.
Because if people look at the laws we're passing or the budgets we're passing, they'll fucking lynch us. Like they will like straight up come for us. So God forbid we let that happen. We got to make sure that we are like publicly doing this clown show all the time. Otherwise,
Yeah.
like people are gonna have a real problem.
Yeah. It's almost like instead of actually doing the legislative job that they have, um, that they've been elected to do, they're more like Twitter advocates for like various power schemes. It's like they're just on Twitter all day tweeting out what they hope will be the right thing, and then basically working behind the scenes to do these kind of shortcuts instead of actually going through the legislative process. It's almost like they've been elected to a job that they gave up on.
That's probably the best way to put it. I mean, like AOC is a prime example of that, right? I mean,
Oh,
she's been just getting slaughtered by
cringe.
Jimmy Dore with like running on healthcare for all, and you got to make people uncomfortable. You can't just give in to the establishment. And as soon as she's in there, she becomes career politician AOC. I was just like, no, no, no. Now's not the time to vote on things that I ran on. That's crazy. You want us to like go on that platform that I ran on? That's ridiculous. How could I do something like that? It's
Yeah,
just
it's
preposterous.
it's totally crazy. And I mean, God, we could spend a whole episode on AOC. I do not get
We're not going
how.
to because
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
that woman just kills me. I just
Yeah.
it's hard not to bring her up just because she's such a. I can't tell if she's an actual crazy person who thinks that Ted Cruz somehow was almost gonna get her murdered, or if she is like the worst actress in Congress. It could go either way. I have zero idea. Either way, she's just terrible. I can't believe the people in New York vote for her. Whatever you want to say about some of the other people, like, oh my God, she's awful. She's just
Yeah.
terrible.
She's
And then she doesn't do anything that she ran on. So what's the point of her?
no. I don't know. I don't know. She just goes on Twitter and says snarky things and gets a lot of likes. I don't know. I really don't know. But yeah,
Yeah,
all that to say, like the Supreme Court is basically looking like it's going to become like impeachment. It's just going to be a partisan tool. Um, I don't know. It already had the hints of being becoming that, and now with this, I feel like reform is just another word for hey, we're going to get our way, and hopefully you don't get yours in the future.
it's reform when you do it. It's a bastardization when somebody else does it, right? That's always how
Right?
it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah.
So now the next thing I would be curious of. So let's play out both scenarios, right? Let's say
Okay.
that the committee comes back, says we need to expand to, let's call it 13, right? Just they
Yeah.
need, because what it's 6-3, so they need 4 people in order to sway and just make it to where they have the picks. So assume you do that. Assume that they get 13 in there, or 4 more, so they move it to 13. What happens? And assume also that they just say, you know what, it needs to stand pat. This is held since 1869. We can't do this. It's going to become a partisan, hack job if we do it. It's like, what do you see as the two scenarios?
So I got to think about that one. What do you see as the two scenarios?
So let's go with the 9 first, right? That's the simpler one. I think then it dies for a while because I think if the Democrats don't do anything about it right now, it would be really hard for anybody to do it in the future because they're so, in theory, they're down, right? Really, I would call it more of a 5-4 hedge the way Roberts votes most of the time. But it's
Yeah.
like, you can call it 6-3. Let's call it that. If the Democrats don't do anything to expand to equalize it at this point, I don't know how you could do it any other time, right? It would have to be like a 9-0 swing before you could say, hey, actually, you know what? We actually do need to add like 9 more justices.
So I wonder about that because this is what has me pausing. Like I keep thinking about what would happen if, like, I feel like every Supreme Court decision that is of moderate importance, this topic will get bumped back up. Like I feel like we've hit a point of no return almost, and I feel like even if they don't get it done now, I feel like whatever the next thing that happens is. So let's say there's a healthcare Supreme Court case that comes up, or there's like a, I don't know. I mean, you could pick any number of partisan topics. Like one of these cases comes up, and maybe it's not even that impactful of a case, but just the fact that it comes up, like, CNN's going to blast it, all over.
Oh yeah.
Um, I feel like the demand is always going to be there now. It almost feels like we've turned a corner on it, you know?
I think you're probably right. I don't know. It's hard to say what's going to happen 8 years down the road, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's
I mean,
really
I
hard.
think it'll die. Because one, either it'll get somebody eventually have to say stop, and that could be the Republicans, could be the Democrats, could be the people, and the people could be like, "Fuck this! This is stupid. Like we're not doing this. Like you're going to stop, or we're not going to vote for you because this is
Yeah.
nonsense. Like do your actual job. If you legislate, we don't care what the Supreme Court says." Because that's the thing that kills me when people act like, "Oh well, Roe v. Wade would get, will get pulled back." Great. So the states would have to do the legislation on it. Where's the problem in that? Oh, well, some states might not do what we want. Okay, let's play that out. Other countries don't do what we want. On abortion, especially, right? Like Ireland for sure doesn't do what we want. Do we get to take over those countries? Is that what the next step is, right? It's like, so you get to control every state around you, but we shouldn't invade other countries. Can we agree on that? Well, yeah, we shouldn't do that. Well, then why the fuck do you get to control the other states? Like, why is that a thing? It's so mind-boggling that people don't see it, where they're just like, oh no, I can control people who don't live next to me. Why can't I do that? It's like because you
Yeah.
have no business controlling them.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious to them, right? Their views are obviously correct. They have the right morals, and we should be following those morals. It's very obvious, common sense, just like double masking.
Oh, common sense. You're right. That I always forget that common sense is the way of the world.
Yeah, yeah. Let me throw this at you because I think this is an interesting. Uh, I don't know. We have slightly different takes here, so I think this is interesting. I want to throw this at you. So, what happens if maybe the Republicans are not so much of a lock to win in 2022? Maybe the party is messier and messier as time goes on because there's kind of this internal infighting that we see. Maybe through, I guess, executive action or maybe even legislative action, Democrats kind of get a foothold into all the voting laws, immigration laws, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, like, they just have the numbers, and the Republicans don't have the numbers and don't win for the foreseeable future. Do you think then that this Supreme Court topic will ever go away if they do nothing right now?
That's a good question. So we got one assumption, which is that Republicans basically shatter, right? The party splits into three or two or whatever, right? Either way, they don't win. Say it's 48% of the population, they don't win anything, or not anything meaningful. So then the question is, if they do nothing on the Supreme Court, would it come back again if the Republicans lose? Right? Is that my understanding of your question correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So the answer is probably yes. If Democrats smell blood in the water, I think they'd pounce on it. I think they look at what Trump is doing and they're not sure. Because they're also like in the middle of this impeachment where in theory, right, if they convicted, which I don't think they will, but in theory, if they did, they can't expect it. Surely they don't expect it. But if they
I don't
could,
think so.
but say they could, he can't run again, right? And I think that coalesces the Republican Party, not for good reason, but just because like people, I still see it. They're just like, well, who else are you going to vote for? It's like, literally anybody else. Like, like that's fine. Like that's an option. Is not voting for somebody else. Voting like just taking the loss and like winning the next election. That's always an option.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. And so assuming they don't impeach him, which I think is fair, I don't think there will be the party fracturing. I think it should happen. I think it has a possibility of happening. I just don't see it happening. I don't think Trump's running again. I think he wants to up his brand. I think he's going to try to find some way to get back on either Facebook, Twitter, Parler, wherever, right? Get back into the limelight because that's all he cares about. Is just being in the spotlight. And at that point, I think Republicans will still. I thought Republicans had a major shot at losing, but Democrats are so fucking bad that it's just like, I mean, both parties are terrible, right? But it's just
Yeah.
like Democrats are so bad and they're in power, and you already have the hashtag Biden lied trending right now because he was full of shit about the checks, which everybody should have known. That was so obvious to anybody paying attention. So
Or the
it's like,
COVID
yeah,
plan.
yeah. So I don't know. I think the Republicans are going to win in 2022. So I think you're right. If they lost, Democrats might readjust on the Supreme Court, but I don't think there's any chance of that.
I think that's a fair point that you bring up. I was kind of looking at Republicans and seeing, apathy and a split, and just internal divisions. But if I was to look at this, like the same amount of criticism, if I was to apply that to the Democrats, I would say that they're just so out of touch with such a large portion of the country, and they keep going further and further and further to their side. Like they are moving leftward faster than the Republicans are moving rightward. Um, I think everybody has a line, right? Like everybody has a line that once you cross it, that's it, you're done. And I think the Democrats are the party of the like flirting with the line. So I could see them just pissing off a ton of people because they suck and they're addicted to Twitter. They're trying to get those Twitter likes. They're trying to show how moral and virtuous they are, and it's going to cross a lot of people's lines at some point. I mean, for me, it's like triple masking. That was, I guess, if I was to put a line somewhere, that's definitely a line for me. That's ridiculous.
What about 2.5? What if I could get you at the 2.5 point? Would that be fine?
Oh
Like
God.
maybe you wore like a mouth guard that had like kind of a retainer on it, and then you just wore the double mask on it. Would that work, or is that?
Just put me in a bubble. Bubble Boy. Remember that movie from the 90s?
Yeah, I don't know why we're going to double mask. Just skip it. Go straight to the like NASA helmet. I just don't understand.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so obvious to everybody that that's what should
yeah,
occur.
yeah.
Um,
We should all be astronauts, except on the planet Earth.
this is a fact. This is a
Yeah,
fact. It's no longer inhabitable in Earth,
yeah,
right? We got to just breathe in these helmets.
yeah. This is
Oh,
crazy. But yeah, yeah. Call it what you will. Probably double masking might have been the line for me because, well, I don't know. I don't know what this vaccine is for if we're not moving towards some sort of normalcy. But
I mean
uh,
that's a great question, right? Is like
yeah,
I haven't had as many conversations with people about the vaccine because one, I just don't care to get into this fucking debate, and I can definitely see where countries are going to try to be like, oh, well, you can't move about if you don't have a vaccine. And they won't do it through law, right? They'll just be like, oh, well, businesses can decide, and all these businesses happen to not
right.
let you in. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, but
every
you can still,
business.
yeah, but also you can still transfer if you have the vaccine. Tell me again what the vaccine's for. Oh, it's so you don't get hurt. Okay, but I can make that call, right? Like I can just say, you know what, I'll just deal with it. I'd rather catch the real thing than the proxy thing, right? Or the mini thing, whatever you want to call it. So if I can still transfer regardless, why does it matter if I get it? And the couple of people I've asked have no fucking answer to that. It's like,
Right.
what's the
Oh, that's
point?
great.
It's like,
That's
okay, so
great.
you're protecting me from myself. Well, then why don't we ban cigarettes? Why don't we ban alcohol? Why don't we ban fast food? Why don't we ban weed? Why don't you just like, let's ban everything? Like, why don't we just do that?
Soda, big sodas.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, quite
that's the most
honestly,
important one.
if we had banned soda and fast food about 20 years ago, we wouldn't have the COVID death rate we have today. Like, that's just a
Probably so.
fact. It'd be
Yeah,
so much less.
yeah, that's true. Uh,
Once again, I'm
um,
not advocating for these things. I don't believe in legalization of what you can and cannot put in your body, especially if it doesn't hurt anybody. But just like facts. The obesity problem we have in America has caused the death rate of COVID. That's
yeah,
the fact.
I think, yeah, I think the question with the masks and the vaccine and everything comes down to do you view everybody, you know, subconsciously at least as a vector for bioterrorism? Like, oh my God, that guy has his nose exposed. Like, he's going to kill my grandparents. I mean, if that's your default view of people, like, I don't know how you come back from that. There's some people who don't have that line that I'm talking about, but there are a lot of people that do at some point. And like, I just, to me, I can't go living a life thinking that everybody is a somewhat of a bioterroristic threat if their nose is out, you
A
know?
lot of people would rather be scared than have to think about it. I mean, I've had to talk with a couple people who said, "Oh, well, the reason the rate's so high is because these people aren't wearing masks." And I'm like, time out, time out. If this was month one, I could see that. But your suggestion is that 11 months later, whatever you want to call it, right? 10 months, 11 months, 12 months, whatever you want to call the first start period. I call it March is kind of the start period for me. So 11 months later, we have people not wearing masks and they're now spreading it. It's like, why weren't they spreading it in month one or two or three? Also, if they spread it, that means they have antibodies now, so they can't be spreading it now, right? Because they would have already spread it. So what about it's like none of this makes any sense. Nobody's like going through and like deducting all this stuff and be like, oh, actually, you know what? That yeah, if this happened, then that would have happened.
Yeah.
Like they're all just no. I heard on CNN there's people who aren't wearing masks, they're not complying. It's like how do you come to that conclusion? Oh, you don't. You're told the conclusion, so that's how you get there.
Right, yeah, it's just it's a conclusion, and then they work backwards from that conclusion that they already have, and develop a narrative. And sometimes they just cherry pick facts. So this is a thing that I see commonly everywhere. Actually, like CNN does this a lot. They already have a conclusion. They work backwards from that conclusion and cherry pick facts that agree with that conclusion, and they build a narrative that way. And that really is a lie via omission, because what they do is they just leave out facts that don't agree with what they have to say, and so they can sit there and go like, hey, we're facts first, and we have all the facts, and our narrative or whatever is based on facts. It's like, well, you also intentionally left out things that don't line up with your narrative, and that is a form of lying. So and your intent was, hey, I already have this conclusion and I know it's right, and I'm going to work backwards from there, rather than, hey, let's go from the bottom up. Let's look at what the facts are, and derive possible conclusions from there. So yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up. This